Hello everybody. A couple minutes early so I can say hey. Ooh, we're back. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time. I have so much to do tonight. I'm gonna get started as quick as I can. I don't want it to take as long as last time. Give you guys a little more bang for your buck, a little faster. It's baking time, Blair. You're right. It's buttercream week. We're making 3 buttercreams today, which is crazy. What time is it? I'm gonna start at 6. We'll give it a couple minutes, 4 minutes. I hope everyone's doing well. I've been busy. Look at all my scalings back there. Woo, I'm ready to go. Did anybody have trouble downloading the recipes this week? They kind of look like this. 3 recipes for buttercream. Chilling out to a little Old Police. Get the kinks out. Yeah, isn't that cool? There's a lot of them, and I was doing them and I had to rescale one because there was just so much butter. I was like, I am using up a lot of butter. I'm gonna have to use them for a cake or something next week, so we'll have to think about maybe doing a sponge and a high ratio cake so I can use them all. I don't know how interested you guys are in learning some basic piping. You all seem pretty advanced, so who knows? Hi, everybody. Woo! This is fun. It's like teaching again. I have to get everything organized and ready. Hello, everyone. I'm gonna pull my hair back in a second because I'm gonna get serious. We are doing buttercream. Hello. What time is it? All right, it's 6 o'clock. We are doing 3 buttercreams tonight. This is the POP, which stands for the Practice of Pastry. And that means that you do things the right way and you do them over and over again and build really strong habits so that you get better and you build intuition, because the more you understand what's going on in the bowl, because I'm not going to throw a ton of science at you. And I know a lot of people think I throw the science at you, but I'm actually trying to get you to think about what's going on in the bowl so that you can internalize it and start to connect the dots. Because when I read a lot of sciencey stuff, my eyes glaze over. So we are doing first American buttercream, or the decorator's buttercream. I mean, I love buttercreams. They are foundational, but so many of the things that we do are sort of like the buttercream. And I just posted a video about, I admit it, like honestly, I ran a business for 12 years. I was scared to death to use a thermometer and make Italian meringue the right way. And I just didn't know how because I was self-taught and I didn't learn until I went to school. So I learned Rose Levy Berenbaum's neoclassic buttercream, and you just used Caro syrup, basically, corn syrup. And you just boil it and then you pour it over your eggs. And I would make that in gigantic batches, and I would use sometimes egg yolks, sometimes egg whites. But I did not have an induction burner back then, and I did not have a range, and I worked in my basement. So I would go upstairs to my kitchen, I would cook it hot, and then I would run down the stairs and then pour it over the egg. So I had to like time it, and I was always afraid it was gonna spill, and I never did. Bake with Lovely said Italian meringue is one thing I'm scared to try. Well, I'm so glad you're here tonight because we are going to do first American or decorator's buttercream, then Swiss buttercream, then we'll finish with the Italian. And that basically goes from no heat, low heat, high heat. And it is hot and it's dangerous. And I'm going to use a digital thermometer. I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. Okay, I would love to start with the basics. That's a great idea. And I wrote down, because I always like to start with what is it and what is our desired outcome. So we're doing buttercreams tonight. And we're doing an American buttercream, which is fat with 10x or powdered sugar. That's really what you're going to find at most grocery stores, bakeries, and what you buy commercially. The fat can be shortening or it can be butter, okay? The more butter, the better the flavor, the more expensive it is, but also the more sensitive it is to heat. So if you have it out in a summer day, you might have trouble with the heat. But the second thing we're making is a Swiss buttercream, where you take egg whites and sucrose and you warm it up until the sugar dissolves and you loosen up the proteins, and then you put it in the mixer bowl whip it until it's a medium peak, and then you start to add butter. That's your buttercream. The third thing we're gonna make is an Italian meringue buttercream, which is where you cook sugar and water until it gets really, really hot, like dangerous hot. And then you pour that over whipping egg whites. And once that's come together, cool down a little bit, then you add butter. So those are 3 types of buttercreams. American buttercream is what we're used to in the United States. And then we call the butter-based, meringue-based, cooked-based ones European buttercreams. So that's what we're going to do. And our desired outcome is that we want a really smooth, good emulsion. So you don't want to see a lot of little broken bits and have it be rough looking. You want it to be really, really smooth, and depending on the buttercream, you don't want it to be gritty. You don't want to feel the sugars. You don't want, and that's why people heat them up or dissolve them or make it so that you don't have as much of a gritty feel. But then as you add all of the ingredients, you want a really good emulsion because you want it to be smooth. And an emulsion is when 2 things go together that don't really want to go together, and they go together like oil and water or vinegar and water. When they go together and hold together for a long time, that's a good emulsion. With Italian, I've never known how to deal with a sugar that touches the cold bowl and solidifies. And I'm going to show you how to do it, and then I'm going to tell you it takes practice. But I was good. It's funny because I didn't use a thermometer for my neoclassic, but I did have to get it between the whip and the bowl edge. And when I went to school, I learned how to do that a little bit better. So I'll share some of my secrets. So we want it to be velvety. We want different things for different buttercreams, but you want it to be smooth when you put it on a cake. You know, so when you drag a knife over it, you don't have a lot of air bubbles or rough bits or chunks of butter. You want it to be smooth. You want it to melt on the tongue. You want it to have a sweet flavor, but you want it to be balanced. Yesterday I made the Russian buttercream by Sugarology. I thought it was Sugarlogy. I've told you I don't watch a lot of the videos, but I read a lot and I love her, and she actually connected with me today. Oh, I left the printout in there. And I have a sample I'll try later and we'll talk about it a bit. But an emulsion is important with buttercreams because we are making 3 buttercreams today. Because when you eat a buttercream on a cake, it's not meant to be experienced on its own necessarily. It's meant to, I know I would love to do a collab. I invited her here, maybe she'll show up. Buttercreams are meant to be part of the overall experience of color, so sight, flavor, and texture. So you might use an egg-based buttercream on the inside of your cake because it's got a lot of flavor, like a French buttercream. French buttercreams are really good for the filling of a macaron. So if you're doing any macaron, you can use just a nice French buttercream and it'll give it a really rich flavor. So I like those kind of things on the inside. And then on the outside, you might want something light, and you might choose it because it's whiter and not care about the color. Or maybe you're doing something you need to be white. So you're going to use a lot of white shortening instead of butter. And mostly when I would work with clients with cakes, I would do a lot of flavor questions to find out what are they looking for. Because a lot of people don't want to be perceived as uncouth. So they'll say, oh, of course I love a European buttercream, or I love this and that. But then when you start to poke at it, you realize, you know, they really want something a little sweeter, a little more familiar to them. So finding the right buttercream is about finding out what the people who want your cake want. It's not really about what you think is good. It's about what they think is good. So beyond the taste, the texture, the color, you're going to be looking at how it handles. Is it super soft like a cream cheese icing so it doesn't really hold up well? Or is it a European buttercream that if you put that between layers is going to be really, it's going to be strong and it's stable and it's going to build a nice strong cake that's not going to slide. I don't know if you've ever used a cream cheese icing, but sometimes if it gets really warm, your cakes will just slide, it'll fall apart. So you want your buttercream to be smooth and able to go on the outside of a cake. You want it to go inside of the cake and hold its shape, and you want to be able to pipe it and have it hold its shape as well. Sometimes you want piping that's very soft and you don't need a lot of structure, and other times you're doing things that need to hold up and need to have good edges. So you pick the best buttercream for the job. And so we're going to do 3 buttercreams today: American buttercream, Swiss buttercream, and then Italian buttercream. And that's kind of the order in which they're complicated. Although the recipe I chose, which is on the link tree, I hope you all got the 3 recipes on the link tree, is called the Decorator's Buttercream, and it's by Toba Garrett. And the reason I like this recipe is because of its use of Sweetex or icing shortening. High ratio icing shortening has emulsifiers in it. And the reason I chose this recipe is because to get that exact decorator buttercream flavor, you need to hold a lot of moisture and a lot of sugar. And the only way to do that sometimes is with an emulsified shortening. So if some of you have had trouble finding Alpine or Sweetex, here's what I recommend you do. Because you have to buy it in these giant 50-pound boxes, which I do, but I use enough of it that it's okay and it lasts forever. You know, because it's not butter, it's not natural like that. But I used to call local bakeries and I would look for cake decorating shops that would get blocks of it in and then sell it in small quantities. If you can't do that, go in on a co-op with people who like to cake decorate, and you might be surprised where you can find it. So you might have to make a few calls and say, do you have emulsified cake shortening or icing shortening? And maybe somebody can help sell you a quart or something like that, because you don't need a ton for these recipes. I've wanted to do lives for a long time and I didn't have the guts. I was worried, but then when the shutdown happened, I thought, you know what, I need to try other things. And so I just went ahead and scheduled one. And then that very first week, you all decided that we could do it as a teaching baking club. So I'm now meeting here on Wednesdays at 6. I lecture like I am and I demo. And then we talk, and then we come back on Sunday, and hopefully you guys have done the recipe or you have more questions. And then I answer the questions and we kind of maybe add on to the learning. I really want to get all the demos done and out of the way, and then we can sit here and chat all day. I use Swiss buttercream for all my cakes. I used to use mostly Italian. I don't even know why. Probably because I could only do the neoclassic. Although, yeah, probably. Okay, so I've gone as an overview over what buttercreams we're going to be doing. But the great thing about this is as I am demoing, I'm going to check the screen and try to answer your questions, but keep your questions, come back to me when I'm able to look at the camera and answer you. But as I do this, I'm hoping that a lot of what I do answers the questions that you have. The best buttercream to use in hot weather is going to be this Decorator's Buttercream that I am demoing right now. Anything with more shortening, because shortening is not going to melt till it's like 110 to 120 degrees, whereas butter starts to melt around 25 degrees. So if it's like when I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, I mean, it'd be 95 degrees in the summertime, and then some of my cake certificate students would show up and say they delivered a cake to a tented area and they had the cake out in the sun, and they did not do this, and they should have listened. So if you have clients and they're telling you, I don't want shortening, or I only want butter, or clients are deciding what recipe you use, you kind of need to be the pro and tell them it's not going to work. Not if you're expecting hot human conditions. But this is the best recipe for professional bakers. And if you work out of your home, the Toba Garrett recipe, Decorator's Buttercream, is available in the 5-quart and the 20-quart, and it's excellent. So on Sunday, I'm going to come back, answer your questions, and then I'm going to demo how to flavor this buttercream with chocolate, freeze-dried fruit. I have freeze-dried blueberries, and I'm going to make a raspberry puree, and I'll make a video of that so you guys can have it. But I'm going to show you how to balance and flavor these. And then I will say, the one thing I used to do a lot of is I would make the Italian meringue and then use it as a filling. It's bright white, it's very pretty, it's very sweet and tasty. And then to make an Italian buttercream, you take your Italian meringue that you have left over and weigh it, and whatever that is, you match it 50-50 to butter. So I would make a giant batch of Italian meringue, take some of it for the cake, weigh out the rest, and I'd still end up with this huge buttercream. And it's just 50-50. I will show you how I use vanilla bean paste, inexpensive vanilla extract, the clear kind. And if you're practicing, I have a Practice Buttercream and a Rose Buttercream. Practice Buttercream is when you don't put anything expensive in it. You can just use it over and over again, and there's no flavoring, and it's not really that sweet. It's meant to be played with. And then the Rose Buttercream is stiffer so that you can pipe roses and stuff. All right, I'm gonna pull my hair up and we are going to get started, and I'm gonna move the camera and I'm gonna try my best to keep track of what's going on here. For those of you who don't know, I work out of a residential kitchen that I rent, and it's right adjacent to where I live, so it's been really convenient. I do have a cottage license, but I do not sell anything. I do TikTok full time, and I give all of my goodies away to neighbors, and my husband takes it to work, but not too much. I don't want them to feel obligated. And also, I compost stuff. If I'm really experimenting and it doesn't turn out good, I'm not going to share it. So my mise en place is here, and I collect as best I can my tools. I have to wash my hands. So on here I have some pastry tips already in the bag, and this is my digital thermometer I'm going to use for the Swiss and the Italian. I have heat safe spatulas. This is an exo glass, and a whisk. And what else? I'm using meringue powder in the American Buttercream, which I will talk about, and everything you need to know about meringue powder is in the ingredient label. Powdered sugar, egg whites, that's what we're looking for. Egg whites, Arabic gum. Gums hold water, they stabilize. Stabilize means you take the water and you lock it in. That's what stabilization means. Flavor and gum trag against, which is one of my favorite gums. Salt and artificial flavor. And it contains eggs, so if people are allergic to eggs, you can't give them meringue powder unless it's egg-free. And the eggs, if you think about it, our buttercream is kind of like a meringue. A Swiss meringue buttercream is a meringue, and an Italian buttercream is a meringue. These powdered eggs allow me to make a meringue without any heat. The Swiss meringue is just a little bit of heat to loosen up all of the proteins and dissolve the sugars. And then the Italian is super hot, where you melt all the sugar, you cook it really hot, and you pour it over the eggs, and you sort of cook them. So these are my tools, and I keep these back here. You wash my hands, and then I'll be in business. I might end up using the torch tonight, you guys, because this place is so cold. And I use the torch on the bowl, not because I'm trying to melt the butter, because I really don't want to. I'm doing it because the bowl is freezing, and if I put my ingredients in here and then you touch it, as they're moving around, even if I get that butter a little warm, if I wait a minute, it'll be cold again because of the way that it's distributed. Thanks you guys for being here. I'm so glad to have an audience. It's the best thing in the whole world. All right, I'm gonna grab the ingredients for the American Decorators Buttercream. And if you went to the link tree, this should be the recipe that lives on the link tree. And I like to print it out because I like to map out, even though I've made this recipe hundreds of times, I still map it out every single time, so it kind of gets in my brain. All right, here are my ingredients. An American Buttercream is based in 10x. 10x is powdered sugar, which has been milled 10 times, and it has 3 to 5% cornstarch. They actually have 6x on the market, and if you read, it's usually in a box. I can't find it at my store, but sometimes you can find it at your local grocery store. Actually, a lot of cake decorators prefer it to 10x because it has less cornstarch. It's a bigger grain because obviously it's only been milled 6 times, but actually has more sugar content. So some people say you can taste the cornstarch, and if you have a sensitive palate, then you might be able to. So when I look at my recipe, I compare what's on here, and I read this. These are the ingredients, and this is my recipe right down the center. These are the method, and then I just rewrite it so I can quickly look at it. Butter, unsalted butter is 398 grams, and I compare these two. This is a habit for me because this way I'm more likely to make fewer mistakes. And I don't mind mistakes when it's a legitimate mistake, but if it's because I haven't paid attention, I'm not into it. All right, so these are my fats. Sweetex and butter, unsalted butter. Doesn't matter what kind, American or European. This is a high ratio shortening made specifically for cakes and icing. It holds a lot of liquid, a lot of sugar, and it has emulsifiers in it. And the emulsifiers make all of our ingredients go together. Because I know butter and powdered sugar go together nicely, but the Sweetex makes it even smoother, even airier, even velvetier, because we are trying to get the lightest possible texture we can. When I scale in my deli cups and I have more than, like I have a big one, because these generally hold around 500 grams, but powdered sugar is so fluffy. So here we are. So we have one of three, two of three, and three of three. And so I know I have all of it. That's my powdered sugar. And then I have regular salt, and salt is often in buttercreams because it balances the sweet. And then I have meringue powder. That's the meringue powder I showed you. Mine's a little lumpy. And then you can choose if you want to use water, milk, heavy cream, or a liqueur. This is when you can use flavorings that you like. If you've ever heard of Treblis, it's a liquid concentrated coffee. You could use that. If you use water, you're not adding any more flavor. And this is at 9% of the recipe. It's quite a bit. So I use heavy cream. I like it. It's more expensive. So if you're running a business and you're looking at saving money, you might want to go with water. And that is legitimately how businesses do it when you're pinching pennies. But I'm using cream, and then I'm using economy or the cheap vanilla because it's white. Also because I don't plan on eating all of this stuff like for real. Like the American buttercream, I'm going to use it to fill and cover and do some demos with cakes. But I don't need to eat it, so I'm not going to waste money on really good vanilla, which is very expensive right now. And then I have cream at 112 grams. I have a full sheet pan because I am going to sift my 10X, and I use a sifter like this because it's narrower than this. And if I were to use my half sheet pan, I'm just gonna make a mess because it's a little too narrow. And I had a job once at a cake shop, a bakery, Scott's Pastry Shop. My job was to sift 50-pound bags of 10X, and it was like, it snowed. And right now it's really dry here, and this 10X is gonna flow everywhere with static electricity. It's gonna be crazy. All right, so let me put this here. Oops, sorry. All right, so we're going to start by creaming the fats, which is our butter and our shortening. And I'm gonna take this, I'm actually gonna stick it on the wall. I can use this tape. I'm gonna stick it right here so I can see it. And that's paint tape, so it comes off really easily. So I am going to take the stickers off the ingredients that I'm actually using right now, and no more. This helps me keep track of, knowing that I have all of the ingredients. Okay, so I'm going to start mixing these on the paddle, the fats, then I'm going to sift. So you can sift first, but I kind of like to do it in a certain order, and that's the order I'm going to do it. All right, let me grab a spatula. So this is the shortening. It's not all-purpose shortening from the grocery store, and it's not Crisco. That's completely different, and mostly it's the emulsifiers. And then this is my butter, and it's pretty soft. My kitchen's a little cold, but it is soft. It's been out all day. And it's pretty warm in here. I turned the heat up. I didn't want to have to fight the temperature while I was working. Your kitchen looks more clean and stable, like a lab. You know what? It's so cool because having these lives, I'm always pretty organized and everything, but having these lives is like it's raised my game because like you guys are going to be here, so I have to like get my dishes done, and I have to hold myself to a higher standard, which is great because I appreciate you guys for more reasons than one. All right, so I'm hoping this isn't going to be too loud. And you kind of want to start out on, I don't do a lot of things on highs. I have a potty mouth, and I'm not going to swear. Because once I start, it doesn't stop. Think about it. I've worked in a kitchen for a very long time. And a lot of people don't like swearing, so I don't want to turn anyone off, but I have a potty mouth. I also have really good practice not swearing though, because I would never swear in school when I was teaching. I have a playlist of gluten-free baking that you can go to, and you can try them. My personal favorite kind of gluten-free baking is when you use natural ingredients that are already gluten-free. I don't like the starches that are in a lot of the mixes, and I don't just want starches in my gluten-free flour. And if you're not allergic, that's great, but I love almond flour and things that add flavor but are naturally gluten-free. That's the best thing. You don't mind the swearing. You know, there are people who have their kids on here. If I hurt myself, I'm definitely going to swear. What can you use instead of C? I don't know what C. Sweetex, Alpine. But you're still talking the same problem. You're going to have to find somebody who carries this, because it's absolutely imperative that you use it. There's nothing you can do to get around it. All right, so I take the paddle and just kind of scrape the sides, but you can tell, I don't know if you can see the lumps. Do you see those lumps? That's the shortening. I should have started the shortening. I would just make a note to yourself that you should start with the shortening and make sure it's smooth. It's just like with cream cheese. You always want to start with the cream cheese before you start adding butter, because it's different. All right, so let me sift all this out. I can tell it's already trying to be all like static clingy. Woo. I'll show you how I clean up a counter too. It's just so messy. I hate chocolate and powdered sugar. It's like the messiest thing. It's just annoying. You can also do this. It's kind of a trick for sifting, where you take the cup, and I need to just bite the bullet and do it. It's so bad. I don't know if it's dry where you are, but when it's not humid, this stuff just flies all over the room. So let me just get it out of here. Luckily, this is the only buttercream that uses 10x. The rest of them use just sucrose. I don't really like touching the food. I like to use the tools. All right, let's see. There we go. See, that's quite a bit. And I made this smaller so it would fit into my mixer. I'm making a decorator's buttercream, which is an American buttercream with powdered sugar and butter and Sweetex. All right, so according to my directions, I'm going to scrape this out. And basically, when you're making a buttercream, and again, like I said, I can tell that the lumps that are in here are the shortening. So I would make a note that you want to start with the shortening, not the butter, because the butter is softer than the shortening. And when you emulsify things, you want two things to go together. And if one's softer, you're not getting an emulsification. So I can still see lumps. Now I could beat this to death and they probably aren't going to come out. So what I'm going to do, and I only tell you this because I know, I'm going to go ahead and do what you're supposed to do, which is to mix this on high for 3 minutes. If they don't come out, I am going to add a little of the 10x to give it a little catch. Not a lot, because I know that'll create some friction to knock out some of those lumps. All right, so I'm going to turn this up. Why does my buttercream taste buttery and look oily even after mixing? You either don't have a good formula or you are not emulsifying it properly, and what I would suggest is you slow down. When you are adding one thing to the other, do it really slow, have them be the same temperature, as close as you can, and don't add too much. Add little bits at a time. That allows all of these guys to go together. Buttercream, buttercream. It's getting a lot fluffier, and I will show you. I'm going to stop it. That's about halfway through. I have about 1.5 minutes to go. I'm not even going to touch it. I'm just going to show you. See how much lighter that is? It's very light, and I just take the paddle and give it a little scrape. And I would say it still has some lumps. You see those? I mean, they're very visible. So after this, we're going to scrape, and I'm going to add the cream next, according to the directions. And because I'm having trouble with the lumps, I'm going to add a little bit of 10X, but only because I know. 10X is, American buttercream is always going to be a little bit gritty. There are a lot of theories where you can heat up and sort of melt out the crystals of sugar that live in the 10X, but it's just going to be grittier than an Italian or Swiss meringue. Clean up some of my 10X here. I sanitize my countertop so it's clean and safe. I am using the Decorator's Buttercream on my link tree, and I have the fats are in the bowl, butter and shortening. So, like I said, there are some lumps. I'm not going to add a lot, just this much, but I'm hoping it will aid in smoothing out the lumps. So if I keep going, the lumps aren't going to come out. So every time you move forward without addressing the problem, you're just throwing good after bad. So if I keep going, I'm going to be really mad at myself down the road because I'm still going to have lumps. All right, 6:36. I'm going to use the torch because helping it be a little bit warmer will also help break those up. I know everybody loves the torch. 10X is powdered sugar. Alright, so I'm hoping to knock out some of the lumps, because if I went ahead and added the cream, I'm just going to have lumpy, and then when I add the rest of the ingredients, it's still going to be lumpy. So we have to get it where we want it to be before we move on. And just heating it up a little bit has really helped, so that's good. So you'll find that things are stuck to the paddle. Things are stuck to the edge of your bowl. It does not hurt anything to stop your bowl, to stop the paddle and scrape. Even if you do it a lot and people in your life are like, what are you doing? Or if you're at work and people are like, you don't need to do that, you do. So it's getting very light and fluffy. And the bowl is so cold, I'm telling you, it's crazy. All right. I actually turn it down a little bit. It's plenty wet. So the next thing is to add the cream and then the vanilla and salt. So I'm going to get the cream. I love heavy cream. The water that lives in the cream is going to help with the grittiness. Not only is the water going to help dissolve the sugar crystals, but the fat is going to help emulsify. That's what natural dairy, like butter and milk, do. Yeah, I like a food processor, but in a commercial kitchen, if you can't do something because it's too big, you don't use these variations because they don't make sense. So in other words, if I were doing this in a 20-quart mixer, I don't have a food processor big enough. So instead of jumping to another system, I have to stick with this one and then solve it. Because 9 times out of 10, if you give this recipe to a student or to a worker and it happens, you need to be able to be empowered to solve the problem. And that's really how we look at everything. I mean, I love a food processor, but even the giant ones are not that big and they are really expensive. You can make cupcakes without liners. They're just not as cute, I guess. They're, you know, you just spray them and they'll come out. You can flip them upside down and then pipe them like a little basket and put flowers on them. I used to do that. All right, let's take a look. I'm going to scrape. There are still some lumps, but I know they're going to come out. I think I have a nice mixture here. And just so you know, I made a mistake. I should have started with the shortening, and I know better. And sometimes you make mistakes because you just forgot or you are talking or whatever. Yeah, there are still lumps in here. I think you can see them. But I will get them out in the process of adding all the other ingredients, because the shortening has emulsifiers that are going to help me. You can have the best technique in the world, but when you have some of these ingredients, they like give you superpowers. They do stuff you can't do. You can absolutely make this buttercream with a hand mixer. You cannot overmix at this state. However, if you whip on high the whole time, you're just going to add so much air, it's going to leave air marks and air holes, so that when you go to pipe it, when you go to cover a cake, it's going to be really hard to make it smooth without all those air holes. So I'm going to turn this down to low, and I'm going to add, you can either do it really slow in a stream or add just a little bit. And then I usually turn it up just a little bit to help it catch. And then turn it back down. I'm actually adding it in fourths. And then I'll stop it and I'll get all of the cream out because I don't want to waste any of the ingredients. I'm going to knock this down. As long as I've got it off, I'll scrape, and then we'll take a look at it. So I don't really love shortening. I'm not big on eating a lot of processed foods at all. But you have to look at what your desired outcome is and if you're meeting it. So if you are making this for a hot day, you can't just do butter. So you have to think about that. But you can't overmix this, but you can over aerate it, if that makes sense. All right, so let me see. So after this, 60 seconds, so that's what we did. And I don't normally follow the times the way I do with this, but for some reason I feel like Toba Garrett's recipes are written like she knows. I can picture her having made a lot of buttercream. So now that that's added, I'm going to add the vanilla and the salt. And I am using what's called economy vanilla. It's fake, it's clear, it does not impart color, which is nice sometimes when you want a buttercream to stay white. But also, because I'm not using this specifically for a fancy dessert, I don't care if it's not perfect. Now I can leave it on fast to add the salt, but I'm going to turn it down for the vanilla. And these fake vanillas, they serve a purpose. It might be real vanilla, but how can it be clear if it is? That doesn't really make sense to me. And I don't normally buy a lot of it, but when I want to add vanilla essence to a fondant or something like that, I want it to stay white, that's what I'm going to use. So then, it says paddle until combined, and then I'm going to add the 10X after I scrape. So I'll give you guys a look at what I have going on here. And this bowl, I might have to even I don't even know if it's going to fit. So you guys might have to let me adjust that recipe so it can fit, because this is just a 4.5 quart mixer. And I always do things too big. I use too small of a bowl. So I'm going to scrape the edges and then take a look at what I have here. And there are still some lumps. So learn from my mistake. It looks like they're smushable out, but it's very smooth and light. And it kind of just falls off there, okay? So now we're going to start to stiffen it up. The nice thing about 10X is that it gives you a really strong it'll dry out nicely, and it'll last, and you can transport your cakes, and it's just really functional. If you want this to get softer, you can add corn syrup. Corn syrup is going to make it more pliable. All right, so I'm going to start adding some powdered sugar. I sift the powdered sugar even when it comes from the store really fresh and soft, which I had. If you have a lot coming out, just pulse your machine. But you can also put plastic on there. I'm just going to pulse it. And you still can't overmix it. So it's kind of nice about this. It's not the same as making a cake or something. It's much more forgiving. As long as you do it on low and you're not over aerating it. So you're going to toggle it. And it's poofing, but it's not coming out, which is great. And then once it gets incorporated, I can actually turn it up to kind of help that. And then turn it off again. But we used to make big 60-quart mixers of this, and it's just a mess. Just whoever was on that day would be covered in powdered sugar. All right, so we're doing okay. I use these two to pick up anything that's fallen on the counter. And now I'm going to pick this up this way and add it. So let me show you what we have going on in here. It's really broken, and it's going to break before it comes apart. It's gotten a lot firmer. I can feel that it's a lot firmer, and it's quite a bit of 10x, so there's a lot around the edges. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a scrape and turn it from the bottom. And you could leave all of these kind of things to the end, and what's going to happen is you're going to then scrape, and then you're going to wish you'd done it sooner. Because remember, every stage of the way, you want to do a good job before you move on. Because if you don't move, you move on, and then you're like, uh-oh, you find all this stuff at the bottom, and you're like, shoot, I should have done that. I would have a smoother product. Okay, so now I'm going to pick this up, and this is how I add dries. This is off, and this is on. So I add a little bit, and then I turn it off again. And you can just do this until you're ready for more. I like it because you can sift right over it. This is reusable. It's not a one-time thing. And then it goes right in the bowl. And you can control exactly how much goes in. Woo. And I'm guilty of getting greedy. I'm always adding too much or using too small of a bowl. All right, remove this. Okay, so the last thing I have, so it adds, add 10x first speed and then add the meringue powder. I'm going to go ahead and scrape it and then add the meringue powder. And I think I'm going to end up with some lumps. So I don't want that to happen to you. So I hope you all start with the shortening and get that nice and smooth, and then add the butter. And you don't even need to add the butter all at once. Give it time to get to come together. And it could be because my shortening's a little bit older and it might be drying out just a little bit. So I'm going to scrape the edges and the bottom and just make sure that there aren't any lumps of powdered sugar stuck anywhere. It's very firm. Now, I don't know if you know this about buttercream, but it can crust up. So once you get your buttercream made, you really need to either cover it with a damp towel or a plastic to touch, but it will dry out. And that's kind of nice on a cake. You can actually texturize it. However, when you're working with it, you don't want it to dry out prematurely. And if you want anything to stick to it, you have to do it while it's still damp, because once it dries, nothing will stick. We use meringue powder because we are creating a meringue in a way. And a meringue is egg-based. And even though it is just an American buttercream, we need to have some of the properties of a meringue. And eggs, especially egg whites, and their proteins, are great at creating strength to hold air bubbles. So the more you use an emulsifier, like Sweetex, which gives you lots and lots of little bubbles, and then you use this, the meringue powder, you are building the ability to get a lot of bubbles that are strong and stable. So it all kind of works together. And meringue powder is interesting. It tastes good. It smells good. They add vanilla to it, and I like it. And then at this time, I can take all my ingredient labels, all my blue ingredient labels, because I use the blue paint, and I'm done. Everything is in here, and I know it's in there, so I can move on. Oh, I'm excited for the next one. So this is just your basic American buttercream. And if you ask your local bakeries, you know, what kind of buttercream do you use? And they say it's mostly butter. It's probably what they're talking about. Let me move this closer. I can't. So it's pretty stiff. It's pretty dry. I'm going to give it a taste. I don't think it looks that great. I'm going to use the torch, and I am going to turn it up. Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking at the directions. Okay, so it's actually emulsified well. I don't see a lot of broken bits. I just see the chunks from the shortening from the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you are making buttercream, one of the tricks decorators use is if you do a really big batch, and this is not too big for this mixer, if you do a really big batch that goes up over the paddle and just mix it on low for like 10 minutes, you'll actually take out a lot of those bubbles and it will look a lot better. So that's one trick people use. All right, so I'm gonna torch it and then I'm gonna move on and it'll be okay. So remember, emulsification happens when things are warm. Fats get incorporated better when they're warm. Emulsification can happen because the ingredients are designed to emulsify. It can happen because you take your time and you add ingredients slowly and in the right order. But emulsification is the name of the game with almost everything in baking. So it's getting, the lumps are coming out, it's looking really nice. And then the last thing I want to say about any of these buttercreams and anything in general, when I say something oxidizes and when it gets whiter, that literally means like OxyClean, you know when you put OxyClean on your whites, they get whiter, you're adding oxygen. If you have a buttercream made with real butter and you want it lighter, just mix it longer. You're going to add more oxygen, it's going to lighten. When you whip eggs, they lighten. They lighten in color. I did egg yolks today. They lighten in color. That's what not oxidation, but that's what happens when you whip in oxygen. All right, so let's take a look. I'm gonna taste it. Yeah, I did a terrible job with the shortening. So what I'm gonna do with this is come back to it later when I'm not on a schedule, and I'm going to continue to let it mix using the torch and patience. So basically I just need time. A lot of times it's time and temperature. But yeah, this could mix for 10 minutes. And so I will do that before I store it. So I can transfer this to a container. I can cover it to touch and refrigerate it or leave it on the countertop if I'm using it tomorrow. I can refrigerate it if I'm using it for a long time, and I can freeze it if it's an airtight container for up to 3 months. And that's not for safety, it's for quality. But if I'm going to use this again, you need to bring it to room temperature and then you need to put it back on the paddle. And you don't want to do it high unless you don't care about the air bubbles. So this made quite a bit. I mean, this will take care of a lot of cake. And it's very heavy, it's very, okay. It's not going to firm up like all butter does if you were to refrigerate it, but it's going to dry out, it's going to stay white, and it's going to be as close to what you think of, you know, as a local bakery or grocery store. All right, so I'm going to cover this and then move it aside and get cleaned up so we can do the Italian and the Swiss. I'm going to do the Swiss meringue buttercream first. And even this. Maybe you know what I'll do? I think I'm going to leave the paddle so that I can show you later how it dries out, because right now it's very sticky, but if I wait a while, I'm going to show you how much it dries out. Yeah, I have lumps in it. So it's going to take me some work to get those out, but they will come out. My recommendation is to use is that you start with the shortening, then you go to the butter, and you only add a little. I added it all at the same time, and it just was not smart. So that is on me. And maybe that won't happen again. But you know what? I don't make this icing a ton, and I used to make it all the time, especially with students. So I'm a little out of practice. And sometimes you have to be reminded of, you know, what all the little nuances and details are of your product. All right, so I'm going to cover this up with some plastic. And a lot of people like to say they don't like American buttercream and all that, but quite honestly, most people do. They do. Yeah, it's very sweet. It's a little gritty, but it's going to hydrate a little, and it will change as it sits. Very typical. Okay, there we go. This recipe is fun. It's more technical. I would mix the shortening literally until there are no lumps, because I know the lumps came from that, but I could have gotten lumps from butter if the butter was too cold. So put the shortening in first, warm your bowl. You can use a heat gun from the hardware store. I would not use a blow dryer. That's too much blowing of dirt around. Or a torch. They're cheap if you're not afraid of them. I mean, it's life-changing. I love them. Or I used a hot towel from hot water for years. Once you get the lumps out, then add a third of the butter that's really soft and then another third, and just move way slower than I did. And quite frankly, if I had done this on my own, I would have gone a million times slower. It's not that I'm a slow worker, but I will not move forward until I know it's good. All right, let me get the ingredients for and I'm gonna get the recipe for Swiss. So that's one we're working on next, everybody. This was the American buttercream. Yes, it's gritty. Yes, it's sweet. That's kind of the nature of it. And this recipe is more to teach you that meringue powder and shortening are going to give you something a little smoother and a little more stable. That's kind of the lesson I think I would say you want to take it away. So this is going to be my double boiler, and I have an induction burner from IKEA. This thing was very inexpensive, and it uses a lot of electricity, so you can't just plug it in anywhere. And you have to have a pan that is induction ready, and the way to know is if a magnet sticks to it. Otherwise, you'll put it on here and it won't work. So I'm going to put water in the bottom of this bowl so that I can make a bain-marie or a double boiler. But here's the deal, and this is a beautiful, I'm using egg whites, so it's safe to use copper. But you want the top bowl to fit into the bottom bowl, not so that it's sitting way up on the top, or not so that it's all the way in, but so that you get a little above and that this part does not touch the water. You don't need the water to be boiling, and it does not need to touch the pan. It is a gentle heat that is I talk about insulators a lot. This is an insulated heat. So we're going to slowly cook the sugar and the egg whites with a whisk and a digital scale so that we don't scramble the egg whites, we loosen up the proteins, and we dissolve the sugar. And then we're going to put that into a bowl on a whip, and we're going to turn it into a beautiful medium peak meringue. Okay, let me grab I'm going to do this. And you don't need to use cold or hot water, just medium is good. And the way to know if you filled it up too high is to put your pot in there and see if water gets on there, and it doesn't. The other thing when you're doing this is it's really smart to have a towel nearby so that when you pull this off, you can do this. If you ever melt chocolate over a bain-marie and you get the water in the chocolate, it's really bad for the chocolate. So this is just a good habit. But it's way less water than you'd think. Not very much, about an inch. Okay, so I'm not going to heat this up ahead of time. If you heat this up ahead of time and you put your food in there, you're going to cook the eggs, just like a hot pan. The other thing is, right here is where you're going to have a lot of heat. And so when I'm cooking my eggs, I'm going to be moving the pan around, distributing the heat. Yes, you have to hold it. You don't have to hold it above, but I hold it and I move it while I'm working. Oh, a little water did get on there, so I'm going to empty a little bit. So see, when I moved it around, it definitely touched it. And again, this is going to go really fast. You're going to be surprised. The other thing is when this is a beautiful pan that's round, and if you're using a regular pot, you're going to want to move in a figure 8 and then around the edges. Because if you were using a regular pot like this, and I'm going to be using this for the Italian meringue, your heat's going to collect here, and then so you're going to want to go figure 8 through the middle and then around the edges. Figure 8 and around the edges. Because wherever there's a hot spot, you're going to want to keep it moving. So this is not a double boiler, okay? Because it's not in there. And then if I had a little pot and it was all the way down there, that isn't either. So you have to, and you know, I'm using induction and not all my pans are induction ready. So this is the best thing for now for me. Okay. Here are my ingredients and I need the recipe. What are you guys doing? You can absolutely use a metal bowl. I use this in a video with making lemon cream and I should not have because there is a chemical reaction. But with eggs, the chemical reaction is good for egg white proteins. It helps them coagulates. So this works, but no, regular stainless steel pan, not aluminum. Aluminum and eggs don't like each other. I would go in other kitchens looking for pots. You could never find stainless steel pots in a culinary kitchen. You'd find aluminum. So we like to use the stainless steel. They're non-reactive and they have a nice heavy bottom. And it doesn't matter what brand. Go to a kitchen supply store and get an inexpensive one. One of my favorites, I don't even know the brand, and I mean, I've had it for years. It's my favorite. I did not do it because I wanted to be as efficient as fast as I could, but I took white vinegar and I wiped this down and I wiped this bowl down because I know I've been using a lot of fatty recipes lately, and when you have fat, even a trace amount, you will not get your egg whites to whip. All right, so I've got the recipe here, and the one we're working with is called Swiss meringue buttercream. It's a little different format. It doesn't have the depth of information, but you still have your ingredients and then the amount down this green column. So I have 306 grams of egg white, 612 of sucrose. Isn't that interesting too? Because I said these hold about 500 grams, but sucrose is so compacted that this is 612, but then powdered sugar only holds around 400 because it's so fluffy. Okay, and then I need 1224 butter, which means I have 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. So this is how much butter. These deli cups and the way that I scale is not only accurate, but I have a physical representation of my recipe and I can tell if it's good or not. So this is the cheap vanilla because I don't want to waste the good vanilla. And I'm going to move these back over there. This is my Italian buttercream and this is my next recipe. So this is what our next one looks like, and what's cool about it is you can compare directly. I had 2 containers for the Swiss, but this one's got a little more. This is the egg, 306, so it's about the same. And then this has almost the same amount of sucrose, but the biggest difference on the Italian is the glucose syrup. So you can kind of physically look at a comparison. So we've now scaled it, we've written out the labels, we've diagrammed out the recipe, we've read the recipe. Now I have it. I'm going to organize it in order of when I use it. And this way, I'm less likely to make a mistake. So that's why I like the system. My handy dandy whisk. So this is my digital scale. This brand, Atkins Cooper, is very expensive. I really like Chef Alarm. They have well, I'll show you. Okay, this is one of my favorite digital scales, thermometers, and I would use this the same as I'm going to use that. These are around $60. I used to buy them in bulk. My students would buy them, but I would put in the order and then they would pay me back. And these come in the cutest colors, pink, purple, blue. I like white. But anyway, this is my digital thermometer, and I'm going to show you a setup that I learned. This in here, and I like this Pyrex because it's stable. If I just use a deli cup, it's going to tip over. I told you guys before that thing has a boinga. It's got a mind of its own. All right, so I'm also going to take a deli cup and fill it up with water, because when I'm done with this dirty part, it's going to go straight into this deli cup. Now you don't want to take really, really hot, like you're up to 120 Celsius straight into the water, and you don't want the water to be cold. But I like having the water there for cleanliness. Okay. So in this recipe, how are we doing? The recipe is on my link tree, and it's got 3 in there. The American buttercream, the Swiss buttercream, and the Italian. And it's written in grams, and I don't work in cups or spoons or anything like that. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know what is softball, hard, I don't know. I know, but I don't know those names. Sometimes I have weird brain. So for this recipe, I'm doing it in Celsius. And I don't know why, but I learned the stovetop stuff in Celsius, but I do the oven in Fahrenheit. I don't know why. But what's happened is I've internalized these numbers to the point that I don't think I could go back. Now I do let you know what the Fahrenheit would be. So I'm going to take this Swiss meringue to 60 degrees Celsius, 140 Fahrenheit. And I know there are a lot of recipes. There are many theories about how to make a Swiss meringue. I totally get it. This is one way. And what I want you to do is not to necessarily think about all the other ways that you could do it. Just focus on this one way and then learn whatever you want about this one way. And then when you go to do another one, then you can compare what you learned. You can compare the results. But this is a tried and true method, nothing weird about it. It is foundational and straightforward. So I am going to, okay, so into my pan, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on low. These induction burners generally lock, and then you have to turn them on, and they work in different ways. So I'm going to turn it down. I don't want it boiling. Boiling's 212. I don't need it to be boiling, so I have it at 180. And you want to add liquids before sugars, generally. Just like I add water before flour. That will give us a little bit of insulating property here. But I have all the sucrose and all the egg white. I'm going to take the lids off. And I want to be paying attention as I add the sucrose because I don't want to overwhelm it. And I'm going to go slow, and I'm going to use a clean whisk. We are making a Swiss meringue buttercream. We're going to make a Swiss meringue, which is taking a high volume of sucrose, I'd have to look, and adding it to egg whites while stirring it, aerating it a little bit over low, gentle heat, at which point we are going to put it into this bowl on the whip, and we are going to, on medium-high, bring it to a medium peak. Once it's at the medium peak, I can start to add the butter. And I'll tell you what, this time I am putting the butter into the microwave for 5 seconds. So I'm going to add just a little bit. Now these are egg proteins. You know that when you do that, they all stick. So it's okay to take your whisk and break those up. Those are proteins. Those are like your muscles. And the heat is going to make them more flexible. Right now they're tight. That's what they do when they gloop together. Those are tight muscles. Those are tight proteins. So I'm going to add half the sugar and just stir it around. Now there are ways to make this without a thermometer. You absolutely can. You can feel, oops, see that? You can feel the liquid and see if the grains of sucrose have dissolved. Absolutely. If I made this every day, eventually I would not have a need for the thermometer because I would internalize how to make it and it would become natural. But until that happens, the thermometer is my best friend. All right, so I'll put that in there. I'm going to, this is very, very slippery, which I find to be annoying. The other thing I want to tell you is that there is nothing wrong with toggling your heat, taking the whole thing off the heat. If you at any point are making caramel or a meringue and you feel like the heat's getting away from you, take it off. Take it off. That's your ultimate control, is that you get to make a decision, and this is very tight. What's going to happen to this is you're going to see it go from opaque to more translucent. It's going to become much looser. I have a chunk of some yucky egg thing in there. You know how you get like little gunks of egg in your egg? Little pieces? You cannot use the pasteurized egg whites for this. Pasteurized egg whites whip up faster than regular egg whites, and they usually have some sort of stabilizer in them. So that is a wonderful question. Thank you for bringing that up. You would want to use pasteurized egg whites if you are making a buttercream that has raw eggs, because that's common. It's like a mousseline buttercream. But if you're gonna cook them, you wanna use regular eggs. And I have some here. I can go look, let me see. I have, because I'm probably going to make the chocolate buttercream with, and I wanna make sure that I'm paying attention to the grains of sucrose that are along the edge. All right, so this is made, that's why I love labels. Let's see what's in it. Oh, organic eggs contains eggs. So this does not have a stabilizer in it. So you could use it, but those are organic. So you definitely want to read your label. I still wouldn't use it, but you could, absolutely. I went to Milwaukee Area Technical College for my associate's degree in baking. Now I moved, see how I moved the pot? And then I went to the French pastry school. So you store the egg whites in the fridge and they're 100%. As long as they don't have stabilizers, you're good to go. So it's starting to get a little runnier. Do you see that? It's not grabbing on quite as much. So now I want to get a temperature. Okay. So we need to get to 60. Oop, and I see steam. So I got to keep it moving. So I'm at 26 and I'm getting 27. So I just want to keep it moving so I don't get any cooked eggs. I just want to slowly be warming it up. And the warmer it gets, the more the sugar is going to dissolve. Yeah, and it's kind of tricky. I am cooking eggs and sugar for a Swiss meringue. And I'm going to add butter to it to make a buttercream. I'm making a Swiss meringue. That is sugar and egg whites. So my induction burner, my pot slides around a lot. It does not grip. So that is one feature I'm not into. So I'm going to turn the heat down. You're going to see quite a bit of steam. It's not boiling, but I just need to be careful. You really don't. And you can tell how it's cooking based on how it looks. It's still pretty thick, pretty viscous. We're at 30. So we're halfway there. The way that heat works is it takes forever, and then when you get to a certain point, it goes really fast. So sometimes when you're watching something and it takes a long time, that's why. So we're going to watch it go up very slowly, and then I'm going to be there. I'm going to be done. I like an induction burner because it doesn't make the whole kitchen hot. So you see how I'm tilting the pot differently. That's making it so this area does not overheat and cook my egg whites. So I'm at 37, you keep the whisk moving and you keep this thermometer probe. And you want to touch the bottom of the pan. The way that these work is the thermocouplers up here. That's where it's getting the heat. So don't worry about touching the bottom of your pan. And I still have a lot of sugar crystals along the edge of the bowl. So I'm just going to keep the liquid moving. And I don't need to aerate it. I don't need to be aerating this because it's going to go in here and the machine's going to do the work. You're going to want to let your machines and your tools do the job. So I'm at 35 and I'm getting to 60 degrees Celsius and I'm at 35. And you can see it's getting much thinner. And if you notice the temperature going down or it's not moving fast enough, go ahead and turn your heat up. But you ultimately, whether you are cooking sugar to like caramel stage and you're worried or you're scared about it, because we are going to do the Italian meringue and it's a lot hotter, don't worry. You are in control. And if it takes longer to get to temp because you took it off to be safe, so what? Who cares? Nobody cares. You're not going to hurt this egg unless you cook it. And you don't want to cook it. So don't be afraid to take a step back, turn things down, take the pan, off of the heat, do whatever you need to do. And if you are one of those people whose urge is to turn it up, I would love to make this go a little bit faster so we could keep it moving, but I'm just going to let, well, it did go down one. So I'm at 180 instead of 1, okay, so it's going up. As long as you're still moving upward, you probably have it on the right temperature. And I'm using the whisk to make sure that any contact area where there might be heat collecting, that I am moving things around. I don't want anything to get stuck. I wish they'd make this pan in stainless steel. First of all, I know they have the Thermopens and the instant reads. They're not safe, and I don't recommend when you are working with sugar to be holding. I can let go of this, and I have a constant temperature read. But if I'm holding something in there and the steam's coming and it's getting hot, because this thing can be clipped on here. I can clip this on, and I absolutely do not like those glass thermometers. I don't want glass anywhere in my kitchen. It's just way too dicey. And they're hard to read. I've always had trouble reading them. This is a meringue, Swiss meringue, that I'm going to turn into a buttercream. And it is on the link tree, but it's different than last week. Just wondering if all commercial Swiss buttercream frosting is made the same way. I would imagine that what I'm doing is very like hands-on and traditional, but I can imagine that this has been automated even in small bakeries to where it's being heated in a kettle, the temperature is controlled, and it's going to get there, and maybe it has an automatic mixer. But this is a just traditional heated up, and there are many people who have different theories about how high you have to cook the sugar, and I'm just sticking with a foundational concept. And then if you like it, like me, one of the reasons that I don't know a lot of recipes you guys mention is because I don't really look around. I get happy with a traditional recipe that works really well, and I have no need to look around. But I am a person who likes routine, and so this is a recipe and a method that I find to be works. So why mess with something when it works? I cannot believe it is already 7:21. This is going to take me, I don't know how I'm going to edit all these videos. They are so time consuming. All right, I'm going to turn it up. I just said don't turn it up, I'm going to turn it up. Oh, I've worked in bakeries. I've worked everywhere. I've worked everywhere. What I'm saying is I've worked at artisan bakeries, and this is how you do it. You just do it in a much bigger batch. But have they mechanized it in larger bakeries? Absolutely. But yeah, this is a small bowl, but imagine being in an artisan bakery with a big batch. So yeah, I've worked with a lot of different kinds of chefs, but I do gravitate toward artisan bakeries. I like that they just make things for today. I like that it's all, you know, scratch. It's oftentimes local. But yeah, they can get big batch even in the artisan bakeries. But yeah, there are a lot of different theories. I've seen a lot of different theories online, and people who say, oh, you don't need to do this, and you don't need a thermometer and whatever. I'm just showing you, if you've never done it, that a thermometer is going to help you, and that you can go slow and be careful. I am going to show you, basically, a beginner's perspective. And if you're more advanced than this, and then you go for it. But if I gave advanced methods to people who've never done it before, they're going to have problems and they're not going to understand why. So when you're learning, you go from big to small. When you're learning, you go from slow to fast. So it's really important that you build the skill and then the speed. It's not good if you're really, really fast and you're not creating quality ingredients. Okay, so here, I don't know if you can tell, but it's getting cooked. It's growing in volume a tiny bit, which is natural. It's getting whiter and much runnier. And we are at 49 degrees. We're going to 60. And I have turned up the heat just a little. I know it's not a perfect view. So we're at 50 degrees Celsius. And I'm not concerned about cooking this. We're not going to have a problem with that. I am worried about the sugar dissolving. That's my main concern. And then after that, if you cook any proteins too fast, they become like rubber. If you've ever cooked an egg really, really fast, you go to eat it and it's all rubbery, that's because the proteins have been cooked too fast. Proteins have to unravel, and unfurl, and stretch out, and then grab onto other proteins. And so they really are like our muscles. They need to be warmed up. They need to be slowly coaxed into doing what they're doing. So we're at 53. It's much more liquid, much more fluid. And I'm going to keep this moving along the edges of my pan. And then this should come to a meringue pretty quickly. And the good thing about the Italian meringue, I'm starting to notice that it's cooking along the edges. We're at 56. The Italian meringue is faster and easier because you just cook the sugars and you pour it over a whipped egg. It's my fave. It scares a lot of people though. It's a very high temp, but if you can master it, you will love it. The nice thing about a Swiss meringue is it's very light. It's a little different. The Italian can tend to be a little heavier. Some of that's the ratio of butter, but a lot of people would prefer the Swiss over the Italian. So we're at 58 Celsius, and I still am seeing some sugar granules. Keep it moving. And we're at 60. Now when you get 60, you don't want to pull it right away. It's a whole world between 60 and 61. So we're still at 60. And you want to make sure it stays there for a sec. And the second it hits 61, I'm going to take it off. So we're at 60 still. This is a great example of why you don't pull it immediately. Keep the meringue moving. There we are, 61. Now it's going in the water. Turn it off, and then I am going to get it off the heat. Okay? This can go over here so you guys can see. Take this out. Get a whisk. There is a chunk of something in here. Alright, so I'm going to get all this in here. Nice and clean, my bowl. There's a little bit of sugar there, but it's okay. That's how clean it is. Alright, this is going to go on the mixer. And if you want to beat off a little bit of the heat, you can go ahead and hit it for a little bit. You'll watch the steam come up. But we're going to keep it there. And for now, that's halfway. So here's where I have my thermometer. This is getting clean, and I'm going to use it for the next meringue. This is the cheap vanilla, and this is the butter that's going in. Now it's firm, and I can feel it's firm. So I'm going to put these in the microwave for 5 seconds, and then I'm just going to leave them in there because the environment keeps them soft. And I did use it today, and that system worked really well. And then I'll come back and we'll talk. Let me show this to you. You can see that it's shiny and it's already gaining in volume. And we want it to stay glossy. And we'll watch it get bigger, and also it's pretty hot. All right. So while that's getting there, and that's what I like about the pastry kitchen is you can be really, really busy and it's really intense, and then you're forced to stand there. You don't want to walk away because you have to watch it. And it's thickening up and it's gorgeous. It's glossy and white, and I love it. It looks really good. So adding butter to it's just going to make it even better. Baking is one of the hardest things in the world. It is so hard. It's weird hours. It's back-breaking. It's specific. But it is accomplished by people who love it. It's crazy. Is someone being obnoxious? My husband is working, and typically he would moderate. People are obnoxious. I will block them afterwards. It's not a problem. The worst thing about social media as an adult, I'm an adult. It's not, I've never written a rude thing to another person online. I never would. I don't even know why people do. Is putting up with people who are rude. It's the weirdest thing, and I don't know if you guys know this, but you can go to all your social media and see every comment you've ever made. And if you are dating or anything like that, you're going to get married, ask to see someone's comments. Because if they're rude, I would run. Yep, it's an induction burner from IKEA. It was not expensive, and I love it. Cheap vanilla is clear oftentimes, and you use it when you don't want something to gain color, because obviously natural vanilla will tinge things brown. And then also, if you're making something and you don't want it to be expensive, you flat out will use the cheap stuff. And I don't use it unless it's something that I'm not intending to eat a lot of. Let's say I'm doing a cake decorating project and I know that it's going to be sitting on my counter for 2 weeks and I'm never going to eat it. It's really just for a display cake. I might put the vanilla in as essence. You know, it's a financial and color issue. Clear vanilla. Yeah, it's economy or clear or fake. Oh, I'm gonna show you the meringue. Woo! Look at that. It's getting glossy. And if I look up close, I don't see any grains. Because you can see if you have not removed all, and you can see how tall it's getting. You can see if there are grains in there that you have not dissolved. So you can kind of, I could have, and I didn't demonstrate it, but I could have taken my fingers in the meringue when it was in the bowl and felt. And if there was no grit, if it was dissolved, then I could move on. I'm also going to feel the temperature. My hands, while I don't like you touching the food, my hands are the best tool for knowing what this temperature is. You know, butter begins to melt in your hand. So if this feels warm to me, it's warmer than me, I want it to cool down. If I add that butter, now it's going to liquefy and you're going to lose the emulsion. With that said, like sometimes when it gets really runny, you can bring it back together by cooling it down, but you're going to lose some quality. So sometimes people think they can take a warm meringue and then throw cold butter in there, but just think about the emulsion, think about temperatures, and never doing temperatures that are far apart, textures that are far apart. You want things to be close together. Let me just get a little bit here and show you guys. Oops. It's nice and glossy. It's holding its shape, but it's holding its shape quite a bit. It's not firm though. It's very good. I love meringue like this. And you can put this inside of a cake or frost a cake with it. Love it. It's lovely, sweet, light. It's like marshmallow. Everything that I am teaching you is not about remembering the science. It's about diving into your own intuition and knowing what is right and what isn't. And when something went wrong in the past, if you understand why, you're just less likely to do it again because you know. You don't need the instructions to tell you. Yes, Swiss buttercream can stay at room temperature. It's no different than butter. Okay, and it's also like the least common denominator. So if you have lemon cream or fresh berries in your cake, then you have to refrigerate it because those are going to get yucky. But this is not your least common denominator most of the time, because I like to fill my cakes with lots of good fresh stuff. But if this is the only thing you're putting on it, it can sit a day or two. It's going to be fine. It's just like butter. It could go longer than that. So you look at the least common denominator. If you're using jam, let's say you tort your cake a bunch, you put a bunch of jam in there and it's really pretty, and then you cover it with this, you don't need to refrigerate that because the jam is stable. It's been cooked. Yeah, I mean, you don't really need to refrigerate butter, and I think in the United States we are refrigerator happy, but I don't want to tell anyone anything unsafe, okay? If you have concerns or are, you know, have people who are immune compromised or old or really young kids, I mean, just like you can't give a baby honey, you know, think that way. Like, what's the best practice? And then just be careful. I am making a Swiss buttercream. All right, so I'm going to show you how I add butter. So this is still pretty firm, like this. It's plastic, see when I push it? And turn it up fast enough so it has catch. And I just put in a little bit at a time like that. And this is soft, it's just a little cold. And I'll show you what, maybe I can get it all in. So if this takes you 15 minutes, let it take 15 minutes. I think that's great. Take your time, things taste better. If you're in a hurry, it will be fine. People will tell you it's fine. You're taking too long, fine. But if you take a really long time, it's not going to hurt anybody, it's going to taste better. So I just let them drop in. And I'm going to have, it's not getting soupy at all. But you never ever want to do your butter so it melts. If it melts, do not use it because you have broken the emulsion and you are not going to have the product that you want. And I love, the more complicated the recipe, the more I like it. All right, well, I think we're going to be able to do all of this. I can also add flavorings later. So what I'm going to do is take this buttercream, I'm going to quart it up, and then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator and bring it out on Saturday night so that on Sunday I can demonstrate how to flavor this. So you guys can learn the infinite ways that you can flavor buttercream. Unsalted butter. It is getting a little soupy, and that is because the meringue was too warm. But I'm going to let it sit. It will cool down in my kitchen, and I'll reconstitute it before we go. And then I'm going to move on to the Italian buttercream, and I'm going to be done. All right, let me just clean up the edges here. Oh, it's nice though. It's not soupy. I think the top just looks that way. And I will show you. I mean, I can already tell it's just really silky and nice. It's got a pretty good emulsion. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to get set up for the Italian buttercream. All right, let's see. And taste it. Well, it's very buttery, but it's also very light. So whatever flavor I put in there, it's going to take to it really well. I know that these charts and these ideas of consulting a chart they feel helpful. What I'm telling you is you have to build an intuition. I know that this looks good, and if I just put it on my counter over there, it's not going to get hard in a bad way on the edges like in the fridge. It would firm up on the edge to the point where that's not good. This is just going to gently cool down at room temperature and firm up. It's firm. So if you want to use a thermometer, you can, but I cannot be tied to a thermometer. Like I just couldn't. And you just know if you work with this, you'll get used to it. So I'm going to show you what it looks like, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So I want to show you, this is the American buttercream. Remember I said it was all moist? And it's moist underneath, but it is dry on top. You see that? You can push your finger in there and it leaves like an indentation. It's dry. So that's what American buttercream does. It crusts up. I mean, this buttercream's beautiful. I think that if I were here by myself, I would just pay more attention to it. I would finish it and it'd be good to go. And I actually would not put it in quarts. I would just leave it in here covered to touch and then pull it out tomorrow if I wanted to put it back on the whip and get it ready to be used. But look at that. And you can tell how velvety. There are no, can you see? There are no air pockets or lumps or anything. It's just absolutely beautiful. That is definitely a top buttercream. Ooh, is that pretty? All right, we're gonna do one more. Oh, it's so good. And if you have ever piped things and your hands hurt, this is the kind of buttercream that pipes beautifully, easily. It'll hold a flower shape. If you go back and look at old Magnolia cake decorating books, all those flowers were piped with this kind of buttercream, very painterly, very beautiful. All right, so now I'm gonna make this one real quick and then we're gonna be ready to move on. So I'm gonna use the induction burner again. I'm going to use a stainless steel pot. This one should be induction ready. Pretty sure it is. Now when I buy them, I buy induction ready. I don't skip it. Ooh, here it is. Okay. This is the Italian meringue buttercream. It is on my link tree, and we're going to be working off this center row. It's going to be about the same size as the last one we made. I need egg whites at 315 grams, which is a half deli. I need glucose syrup at 33. And this we're going to pop in the microwave for 5 seconds. It's going to come right out. And then I need sucrose at 633. Boom, boom. And then water at 150. And then I have a lot of butter. I have 1,131 grams of butter. All right. So I'm going to, and one thing you can do to help with the emulsification, I'm not going to do this step, is take your butter, because I don't have another mixer, is take another bowl and put your butter in there and paddle it on low until it's like pomade. and then you use that butter to go in your meringue. So if you're concerned your butter's too firm or you're going to get lumps like I did with the American buttercream, paddle the different fats and then incorporate them because that helps a lot. All right, so this is really fun. It obviously is my favorite thing to do. All right, so here's what we do. Here's the trick. Let me grab this. I clean this bowl with vinegar. It's nice and clean. And I'm going to put, now think about what we just did with the Swiss, right? We cooked the Swiss meringue, which is in heat, the egg and the sucrose. This time we're taking the egg and putting it in a mixer bowl, okay? So that's already your big difference there. And that egg whites are a food safety hazard, and when I touch them, I'm gonna wash my hands. Salmonella lives on the chicken, in the chicken, on the egg, on the inside of the egg. And if you think you're from a country that doesn't have salmonella, I get the food safety report every day. It is all over Europe. And I'm not talking bird flu, I'm talking salmonella, which is a big problem. All right, egg whites are in here. That's already different from the Swiss, and that's something that we know. I should have cleaned this before I moved on because I don't want any of this getting into my guy. If there's any fat in here, my egg whites will not whip. They don't. And you know why? Have you ever wondered why? Do you remember how I talked about proteins and how they unfurl and grab onto each other to create these nice connections? Well, if there's fat, they slide. Just like when you make an enriched dough, like a sweet roll, and it's really soft, those fats are making the gluten strands more tender, softer. And if you add any fat to this, any residual grease or a tiny bit of egg yolk, it's just even the tiniest bit, those proteins can't do what they do. It's just fascinating. All right, so we need to cook the sugar, water, and glucose to 100 and, I was gonna do 125 Celsius, but I'm gonna go to like 123, 124 because it's very dry here. When you cook to a higher temperature, you lose more moisture. So in the summer, I'm gonna go to 125, but right now I think I'll go to 123. But at the same time, this has to come to temp and this has to come to an aerated meringue state, medium, stiff medium, at the same time. That's the trick to Italian butter meringue. All right, so I am always going to add the water to the pot first, and then the glucose, and then the sugar. And I am going to pop the glucose in the microwave for 5 minutes because otherwise it won't come out. See? And glucose has emulsifiers in it and an acid. So it's going to help keep down the sugar crystals, and it's going to help make a nice sugar syrup. And when you are cooking sugar, you want to dissolve the sugar crystals before you up the temperature. So the reason you add water is an insurance policy. If we added just sucrose, we could get it caramelized. The water is going to give us time, but then we're going to spend all the time just cooking the water off. That's kind of what you're doing. It still sticks a little, but this is what I do with honey or anything sticky. You just put it in the microwave for 5 seconds. That's why I have a microwave. I don't really use it for much else. And there you go. This is a high heat all-clad spatula. I'm going to switch, and I'm going to put about 1/3 in here, okay? And let's see, I really want you to be able to see. And I'm not going to tilt the pan. The sugar is in the middle. It's not on the edges. And I'm not going to push it, but I'm going to take the sharp part and I'm just going to make some dents in it so that the water can kind of get in there. But I don't want to push it around because I don't want to create all those sugar crystals around the edge. And crystals, like, they grow. They grab onto each other and make clumps, and they grow. The more you agitate it, the more that happens. So I am going to pull from the outside in very carefully. And I've worked places where they're like, I thought you weren't supposed to touch. And it's like, you're not. But, but if you've done it a lot and you start to kind of become familiar with it, you know that you can move it around without increasing the mess on the edge and also without agitating it. You can learn to do that. I did do a recipe with corn syrup today. I posted it right before my live. It's the Neoclassic Buttercream by Rose Levy Barenbaum, and it works beautifully. But this is what we're doing. So we did 3 buttercreams, one with no heat, the second one with a little bit of heat, and the third one with a lot of heat. So I'm not even going to start this guy, although I could, and then once it gets to the stiffness I want, I could just turn it down. But I'm not going to start this guy until this is like at least looks dissolved. It's still sticking to the bottom of the pan. I am on, I'm going to turn it down to 180. I want the water to kind of hydrate it before I begin to bring the heat up. And then once the sucrose particles are dissolved, then I can bang the heat. Then I bring it up, I get the thermometer, and I'm good to go. But until then, I want to be very careful. It's opaque, it's not clear, there's just not a lot of heat. I'm just gently hydrating the sucrose. So we cook this to 124 Celsius. We whip this to a medium stiff, and then I pour this in here between this and between the side of the bowl. When you use a straight-sided pot, it's kind of hard to get it right on the edge, but if you have a lip like this on your pan, you can rest it. And what you want to do is it's counterintuitive, pour it down the side of the bowl. Even though you're going to leave a stripe, the heat is going to keep it moving and nothing's going to get stuck to your whip or the side of the bowl. So it's what I learned to do in pastry school. It's ingenious and it still takes a lot of practice. And if you accidentally spill any hot sugar, you have to train your brain not to put your hand out to catch it. You have to train your brain to back up and back away. And if you are wearing synthetic tennis shoes or anything where this, if it were to fall on you, could get stuck, you're going to be in trouble. That is why chefs wear things they can remove quickly. It's for safety. So I have clogs on. I could throw them off if this stuff landed on my feet. So I don't feel as many crystals on the bottom. It's not stuck. I did the water, the glucose, and then the sucrose. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I'm not going to bang it. Does adding the sugar in bits prevent the crystal formation? Do you recommend that for caramel? I definitely recommend adding it a little at a time, but I'm really looking to let the water soak in. It's like sand. And I'm not stirring it, I'm pulling it inward just so I can feel the bottom. The crystals form more from agitation. So you do need to keep it moving, but if you keep the temp low enough that the sugar particles dissolve, you won't have the problem of it caramelizing. So if you are dry caramelizing or doing a caramel with sugar and a little bit of water, lower the temp. Once you have no, and I can still feel sugar crystals. Once those are gone, and this is opaque a little bit, as it starts to get a little clear and I'm ready, you're going to see everything changes. I'm going to turn the temperature up. I'm not going to touch it anymore. This is going to come out, so I'm not going to stir. And I'm just going to use the thermometer. And when I get to temp, it's going to go on here. So I'm moving it around just because I want to confirm that the particles are dissolved. So I'm like feeling it. I could close my eyes and do this. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit more. And what I recommend is if you're learning any of these new techniques and you've been afraid to do a Swiss meringue or this, the Italian, don't be afraid, just slow down and be willing to turn off the heat completely and take a step back. All you're going to lose is time. Now this is getting very frothy. I'm going to show you. So that is getting very frothy. So that's good. And I'm not going to check the temperature of my sugar yet. There's no reason to. I haven't turned up the heat and it's, not dissolved. Uh-oh, my apron's coming off. And my mixer's not even that fast. There are no bubbles yet. There are people who can do sugar with their fingers. They can do cold water and they can touch it. And there are people who can do this by sight. And there were times when I could because I was making it every day. But if you haven't made it in a while, you're just going to want to take a step back. Just take a step back. Let your ego go. Doesn't matter. Now these pans tend to get heat around the bottom and ingredients tend to, collect there. So just take the spatula without sloshing, just clean up the edge. And then take the spatula and clean up the bottom. If anything's sticking, you want to like feel it. Just feel it. I'm going to turn it up yet again. I personally really like this recipe because I love the thrill of getting it all ready at the same time. Sugar, yes, lemon juice inverts sugar, sucrose, yes. However, it's bubbling and I want to turn it down just a little because I can still feel stuff on the bottom. If I leave those crystals on the bottom, they could brown. So it's starting to bubble, it's getting a little clearer, but I'm going to definitely make sure that I have the bottom done. So lemon juice is great if you're making a caramel, but glucose is what we're using. It just takes away the issue altogether because it has an acid in it, which is what lemon juice is. So for this, if you don't have glucose, you're welcome to use something else. But you know, acids are all different. They're all different strengths. And lemon juice is relatively mild. All right. We're getting close, but I'm turning it down again because I still feel it's got some sugar crystals in there. And it's no harm, no foul in terms of like it's still going to cook. But you'll get those sugar crystals in your buttercream and you'll say, why is my buttercream gritty? And it's gritty because you didn't dissolve them all. So it started to bubble, no big deal. I just back off the heat. And I'm good to go. And oh, now it's getting clear. And before it was opaque and I couldn't see the bottom, and now I can see the bottom. So now I have more of a syrup. And once you have a syrup, then you can crank it and cook it. And if you get the edges all messed up, I don't use water and all that to wipe down the edge. You could put a lid on it, let the steam build up, but I just leave it alone. Just don't move your spatula. This is coming out, and that's it. And now I'm going to turn it up, and I'm going to turn on my, make sure this is clean. I don't want anything in here that, I'm going to turn on my timer. And this is bubbling. And I'm going to show you the meringue. It's very liquidy still. There's some stuff on the edges. Very liquidy, not holding up at all. So now that I am at, it's really hot. So I'm gonna take this off and let these two get closer. This says I'm at 112. I just want to slow it down just a little. I'm going to between 119 and 125. I think when I get to 124, I'm going to call it. So you're at about 102. You can go ahead and start your eggs. But you just want to keep an eye. See what I mean about the steam? This steam is so hot, it'll burn you. And if you have one of those thermometers you have to hold, you won't be able to do it. And you need to keep the thermometer in the entire time. I could leave this like that. The only reason I like to hold it and move it around is because there is a different temperature at all these different areas and you get hot spots just for accuracy. So this is coming up. And I want this to be about medium. And the way you do it is not just this, but you flip it over and it's not holding. So I'm going to keep going. There's no trick to it. You literally flip it over and it should hold its shape. You don't have to coax it, it's just going to do it. So I'm at 115. We're close, like in terms of like, whoop, this needs to get where it needs to go. And I don't want it to be too stiff. And if you remember me saying, if you get too stiff of a meringue, your proteins are like that. And then when you go to add this, and to make a bigger, strong, they have nowhere to go. It's like you stretched your legs out, and if you go any further, you're going to tear a muscle. The same thing. When you whip an egg, you need to leave a little bit for that muscle, that protein fiber, to get a little bit longer, to give it room. So we don't want to go too far. We want to go just right. And we're at 117. So technically I could use this sugar. There you go. See how if I lift it up, it leaves a peak? I don't have to goof around. All right, so now I'm going to turn that down on low, like this. I'm going to hold it. And we're at 117. And I'm just going to turn the heat up because now I want it done. 118. And that's holding. And right before I add it, I'm going to turn this guy up. Because when you add this, you need this moving. You don't want this to sit on it and cook it. I'm at 119. I think this is so exciting. I don't know if you do. I hope I haven't lost everybody. All right, 119. 120. Woo-hoo, we're getting there. And I really probably shouldn't, but I want to show you the bubbles. Look at the bubbles, aren't they pretty? And we're at 122, so I need to be careful. Look at that. And then there's our meringues just kind of hanging out. Oh, we're at 123. All right, I got to put you guys back. And I'm going to show you how I pour it. And all right, so we're at 120. There we go. We're at 125, and I'm going to stop. You know what? I'm going to double check. It's at 123. So that's lesson learned in terms of, I want to make sure, and it is at 124, but I'm just going to bang it just a tiny bit. It'll come right back up. But the bubbles change, and the more you do this, so I'm at 124, now I'm going to move, this is what you should have done. I should move it around. There we are, we're at 125. So I'm going to pull it off, I'm going to get rid of this. Oops. Put this on a towel, and then I'm going to turn this up, and unfortunately, like I said, I'm right-handed. I'm going to try to show you how I connect and rest that on the edge. Turn it up just a little, and I am dripping it down the edge of the bowl very slowly. I'm not concerned that it's going to stick to the bowl because the heat and the distribution of the whip is going to do what it needs to do. I'm letting the tools do the job. Keep adding, keep adding. And you don't want to go overboard trying to get it all out. Just finish it up. There we go, because there's some left in there. Okay? You can see. And you don't want to add water to that right away. It's very hot. Let the temperature come down. And I'm going to take a clean spatula that doesn't have fat on it because this is still at this point a meringue. And I'm just going to help this top part. And that's it. Literally, that's it. Once that gets cool enough, I add the butter just like I did to the Swiss. No different. So I don't know, and I hope that that was an example of how similar and how different they are. I just love a back-to-back when they're all slightly different. That's why it would be fun to do a cake as a high ratio, a sponge, and then something else. Does it matter what type of meringue you use if you're going to dehydrate it? That is a great question. Typically you want to use some form of a simple meringue. Like I've done a ton of meringue videos where you whip. It comes down to, this is cooked now, so it's going to be chewier. You could use this like a marshmallow. That's too wet for a cookie to dehydrate. So what I've found is if you use a French meringue or a simple meringue and you stabilize it with 10x at the end, so you make your meringue, which is sugar and, egg white, and then you fold in 10x or cocoa powder at the end, that dries it out, and then you can do it in the oven or in a dehydrator. The difference between those two is in the oven it gets really crisp, and if you go long enough it could start to caramelize a tiny bit, which does, it's pretty and it tastes really good, but if you put it in the dehydrator it's going to get way shinier and it's going to stay really white, but it is going to be a little chewier no matter what you do. No matter what you do. And I love comparing the two, and I've done it a lot. I use a French meringue as my favorite, or a simple, and I have a playlist, and I play with meringues all the time. This is like one of my favorite things to do. And it should be crispier. And I have a pavlova, Oda Langhi did a really nice one for a rolled pavlova, but for a regular pavlova, you do need the right ratio of dry on the outside and chewy on the inside without being like mushy. And if any of you guys watch my chocolate pavlova, people have said so many times, it's so runny. It was not runny until I added cocoa powder, which has cocoa butter, which is a fat. So I did my meringue to the right place, knowing that when I added the cocoa powder to it, it was going to deflate because of the fat. So there's always a reason, and you have to think it through. You have to, for yourself also. If something doesn't come out the way you like it, don't just think it didn't work. Don't just get rid of it. For gosh, use it, play with it, and learn from it. That's the great thing about mistakes, is how much you can learn from it. So we are making the Italian. It's screaming hot. I can't touch that. I could not leave my hand on there. Woo! That's hot. Okay? So this is going to take a very long time. And I don't want to add cold butter to it. You want this to get almost, so you can hold your hand there and it's just slightly warm. And then all this butter is going to go in there. And on Sunday, we're going to come back and I'm going to take all these plain, unflavored buttercreams, and I have 2 more. So this is the neoclassic buttercream I made today with egg yolks. See how yellow it is? And this is made without a thermometer with corn syrup. And I made this for 12 years for my clients, and you can use eggs or yolks or whites. And then this is the Russian buttercream I made yesterday. And Sugar Logie actually texted or commented, so I'm going to go get her comment. I'll be right back. And I'm going to get a spoon. So I've gotten a lot of comments about this. So a lot of people knew about it. I'd never heard of it. And it's just butter with sweetened condensed milk. However, her process, I agree with 1000%. She adds the 10x to the beginning of the butter stage. That helps it stabilize. The cornstarch dries it out a little bit. It gives it what I call catch. So she also said, I got the consistency right, and then she said all emulsion-based buttercreams, and I'm talking about Sugarology. Her name is Adriana. All emulsion-based buttercreams tend to be less sweet by about 10% the day after preparation. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm baking and making things to serve to other people. And so then yesterday, it was really sweet. And it's just, I think this is an amazing buttercream. So it was, in other words, it's sweeter on the day you make it than the next day. If you don't like sweetened condensed milk, you're not going to like this, but I love it. That caramelized dairy is really good. I mean, all I can say is, if I were embarrassed of what people thought of me, I would not be honest with you guys. And the honest truth is, I've never heard of Russian buttercream. I love it. I'm a convert. Glad that I learned about it. And I can learn new things every day. And I've been in this industry since I was 15. And if I can learn something new, anyone can. And it's not that I know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I tend to find stuff that works and stick with it. And I don't like trying new things that are hacks or aren't proven. But when you have a trusted source like Sugarology, where she has like a PhD, I'm going to trust her and I'm going to try new stuff. And I will tell you why this is important. This stuff is expensive. And so I don't know if everyone else can afford to play with 10 pounds of butter a day, but it's important that the recipes work and that the recipe developers take it seriously. So I made that this morning. And I did put vanilla bean in it. I don't know if you can see the specks, very pretty. But I can still flavor this with complementary flavors. Now the Russian buttercream has a good amount of salt in it, and I really like it. Let's see how hot this is now. Woo! This is the Italian meringue, and it's cooling. I cooked it to 124 degrees Celsius with sugar, glucose, and water. And now it's being whipped over partially whipped, medium heat egg whites, but it's so hot I can barely touch the bowl. So in other words, we might have to wrap it up before I add the butter. But this meringue is shelf stable. You could put this in a deli cup and leave it on the counter until it falls apart. And it might take a couple days. You do not need to refrigerate it. If you have a restaurant or you want to do a plated dessert, once this is done coming together and it's cool, it's going to be very shiny. You can take it and smear it on a plate and then take a torch and make it like a torched marshmallow. That's what they do in fancy restaurants. So if you can master an Italian meringue, this is a filling. It is a topping. You can coat a cake in it. You can torch it with a brulee torch. You can fold other ingredients in it to make other ingredients. You could fold pastry cream into it. You could, you could fold it into other things. It will aerate and sweeten. So these buttercreams are just buttercreams, but I always say baking is making kind of one thing. Pastry is taking different components and putting them together in new ways. That's when you get into the world of pastry. And making an Italian meringue is not easy. You have to pay attention, you have to know what you're doing. And once you master it, it's easy. But if you master it and you've got skills, you can do 10 things with this. And that's the part I find fascinating about it. This is the Italian. The Swiss is over here. Just sitting back there. I wonder if it's gotten much firmer. Oh yeah. In fact, you can tell how much firmer it is. Because like this was almost, So just being in a cool kitchen, it's just gotten, it's like silk. It's absolutely beautiful. So what I'm going to do is bring all of these back on Sunday. I'm going to show you how to flavor them. Sunday is when I'll be able to answer specific questions, and I would love it if you send them to me in advance because I can get to them and not miss them. But also I'm going to show you how to flavor them, how to pipe them a little bit, what the benefits of one are over the other. I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to leave it until it's cool. It's so hot, and this is one of those, in the pastry shop, I loved getting any kind of job. Not that I would just stand here if I were working, but I love jobs where you're kind of stuck in one spot. It's just like a nice relaxing moment in the day when you're not running around. Any hints on the flavors? Yes. I'm going to do a pulverized fruit that's been, freeze dried. I bought some blueberries. I am going to do an unsweetened chocolate, just melted and added, because there's such a sweetness. I don't think you need to use sweetened chocolate. And I'm going to make, and I might post the video, a raspberry puree from frozen raspberries, and that's from Rose Levy Berenbaum. And all you do is put those on a sieve, and throughout the day as they soften, you just squish through the pulp and liquid and leave the seeds behind, and then you cook it down, and it stays so bright red and beautiful. And you can add lemon juice to it or sugar. You can also leave it plain and add it to this, and it will tinge it a bright pink, and it's beautiful, and it's the most intense flavor. So I'm going to do those 3 things, and then, maybe I'll show you how to use professional Tribly or some other things that we use that take into consideration the liquid ratio to fat and all that kind of stuff. The reason you use frozen raspberries is because the membranes have been frozen, so they're actually broken because all the ice crystals break the cell walls, and that makes it so you can squeeze out all their juice. It's genius. You want me to lift it up? It's so sticky. You guys figured out it's really hot. All right. So it's getting very thick. It is a little grainy. Still very warm, but it's obviously thickening up. Usually, whenever I'm concerned about a buttercream, which I'm usually not, but if I am, by the time I've added the butter and it's been given a full chance, it comes together. It's like magic. It's very forgiving. If you can just pay attention to the beginning part, the whole thing overall is very forgiving. My science, you put the butter too soon and it flops. Yes. Usually you can get it back. You can let it, if you let it, again, don't shock it in the cooler, but if you let it chill at a natural rate, let it do what it does, then you can put it back on the paddle and it sort of will come back together. But if you rush temperature changes, you're going to get poor results. If you take something from the freezer to the counter, that's not as good as if you take it. Like when I do my butter, I take it from the freezer to the cooler to the counter. I give it time to do what it does. So this looks really tall, but you know what's going to happen as soon as I add that butter fat to the meringue is it's going to deflate. And then all of this butter is going to fit in here. If any of you are doing this for the first time or you're not super familiar with it, I don't recommend cutting the recipe necessarily in half. Maybe go down to 60 or 75%, because if it's too low, you're going to have trouble incorporating the sugar with the egg because you're not going to have enough. In that amount of neoclassic, I was worried about it, but I got lucky. I did a good job. But this is so full, and it was such a nice volume that it was kind of easy to get the egg, the cooked sugar in there. So if you go too low, you might create other problems for yourself. But if you keep it at about 70%, you might not be as nervous, and you won't waste as much product if you have any issues, because I'm always worried about wasting the food or the cost or whatever. You can make either buttercream right now. This will be fine. I could use this. And there's something about being a cake decorator when your hands get so tired that when you can work with something soft and lovely, you kind of want to. And this will pipe beautifully. This is still hot, very hot. Imagine what nature's gonna do to this. As it cools, like I've said, you cannot make the ingredients do what you want them to do. They have to do it. And by cooling naturally and slowly, it's like, it's nature. It's gonna be at the right time to receive the butter. So if I hurried it up, tried cooling it down fast, I'm skipping a step. So pastry is a lovely exercise in doing things at the right pace, setting up time to work and focus, planning how you're going to do it, planning ahead, and then executing it without being rushed. There's always a reason. So if you're not in a rush, if you can focus, instead of looking at it as a chore, that's why I break it up. I scale everything 2 days ago. I scaled this stuff yesterday. I can make it today, and I could leave it on my counter in the morning, come in and decorate a wedding cake if I wanted to. If you break it up in a way that's neat and organized, and you use trays and deli cups, and you do this, it's like enjoyable. You turn a chore or something that creates chaos, and you make it like a pleasure. It's wonderful. It's my favorite thing is once everything's scaled and all I have to do is work, I'm my happiest. It's the best. Yes, making a system, and the system that I offer you guys, I did not invent. I copy smart people who've been in pastry since they were little. And there's some people who've been in pastry since they were born. And I follow them, and when I saw it done, I was like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be done. So it is a system. It's designed to make it simpler and better and better. It's not designed to make your life harder. It's definitely not. Well, I mean, we could wait another 10 minutes for this to cool, but I think we should wrap it up. I'm going to be adding the butter to it when it does, and then on Sunday, it's still very warm. It's going to take a minute. But on Sunday, I'm going to come back at noon Eastern Standard Time, and I am going to add some flavorings, talk about different things, more of like the uses, what people like, and stuff. Between now and then, I'm going to be uploading videos that are about complementary recipes or other things. So I'm going to do the raspberry puree. I'm making an Italian meringue buttercream. No, it won't go hours. You don't want to walk away. You want it to be in the sweet spot. It'd probably be better to not whip it and just put it in a container and walk away and add the butter tomorrow if you had to. But it's cooling. It's still pretty hot. It's weird. If you have any suggestions for Sunday, just drop them in any comment section. I check all of them. I would say this is going to take another 15 minutes, would be my guess. It's getting there, but if I'm not in a rush, I just let it go and do the dishes or something. And you know what I could do? You guys are giving me an idea. I could leave it for Sunday, use some of it to torch on a plate, and then show you how I use just the Italian meringue. Do you want to do that? Because I have lots of buttercream. And then I can show you how I take Italian meringue and turn it into buttercream. Because if you have Italian meringue on hand and you don't know what to do with it, you have too much, you can just add the equal amount of butter to it and make a buttercream, and then you can freeze that for later, and then you've got buttercream on hand. So you think, okay, I'll save the meringue, I'm gonna save the butter, so I'll put this in the refrigerator, and I'll pull it out Sunday morning or Saturday night, and I'll show you how to utilize this in some other ways. So we'll flavor buttercream, we'll utilize Italian meringue, and anything else you guys think of, let me know. Yeah, there used to be a Martha Stewart cake where she took a star tip and did like a porcupine, and then they torched it, and it was so cool. It was in the 90s. I remember just being blown away. I love torched meringues. And it's fun because you can put the Italian meringue in a big deli cup and save it on the countertop. And if you're having friends over tomorrow night, throw some of that onto the plate and a brownie on top, and a little ice, torch the meringue, a brownie, some ice cream, and you've got yourself a little s'mores, a little crumbled up cookie, and you've got a s'mores dessert without even much trouble at all. And I've worked with people who set up desserts at restaurants, and they tell the people, like, don't refrigerate the meringue, and they would anyway. You don't need to. That introduces moisture, but it's shelf stable. Once this cools, it's shelf stable, meaning it won't separate. If you took a simple meringue and just left it in here, there would be a separation of the water at the bottom. But with this, it'll take days before that happens. So Italian meringue is a miracle. Yeah, without the butter added. It's just a different ingredient, and it's so good. It's one of my faves. And you could add vanilla to it, make it look pretty, and then ice a whole cake with it. The only thing is you want to move really quick because it kind of firms up fast. I get my deli cups from Restaurant Depot, but I don't like their lids. And I won't order these online because I like to touch them and make sure they're okay. So usually the cups themselves are fine, but the lids are always a problem. But no one's ever happy. But these are the cold deli cups. I've been in classrooms where it took me all semester to get rid of the hot ones because the hot lids don't fit the cold bottoms. So pick one and just buy one, otherwise you're going to end up with too much junk and they don't fit. I love getting information and comparing what I know, layering in and confirming, and then also learning new stuff. It just helps round out my education. It's great. You're very welcome, Phyllis. Thank you for being here for me to share what I know. I taught in person for years and I adored teaching. Loved my students, loved every second of it. And if you ever meet one of my students, you will hear how much I love being a teacher. So I am glad to find an audience here. I'm making it in Italian. That's why it's taking so long to cool. For the first time though, I'm warm. It's still hot. All right, you guys, thank you. Thank you for practicing with me. I will see you all, hopefully, on Sunday at noon for the POP Baking Club. The learning continues. The sharing and the love of baking and building a practice happens over time. Little increments at a time result in you getting better, to one day you go and do something and it just flows. It just happens much easier. Yay! If you miss my lives, they are all posted on YouTube under the Practice of Pastry, and they're labeled Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is Wednesday, today, so it'll be Part 1 Buttercreams, and then Part 2 will be on Sunday. And Part 1 is a demo lecture. Sundays are extrapolation of ideas, additional uses of the ingredients and components, and concepts that come up through all of your questions and comments, which I literally couldn't do it without that because you remind me of all the important points. And also you bring up what's important to point out as I'm working, and I forget sometimes. So thank you so much. I'll see you all on Sunday. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful evening wherever you are, all over the world. Happy baking.